My name is Adam Corson. I'm a blacksmith and my website is corsonforge.com. Most times on the weekends or my days off, I try to get up around 6 o'clock in the morning. So I'm starting my forge time at about 7. Especially during the summer here in Southern California, it gets up to like 100, 120 in the valley. So I try to keep as much of my forging time in the mornings. Anything that doesn't involve the heat of the forge, I can do the rest of the day. But when I'm actually forging and have that forge going, it's unbearably hot. So either as early as I possibly can in the morning or at night as soon as I get home from work. So for today, we're gonna be making a copper and steel coffee scoop. What brought me to this design of this copper and steel scoop is the contrast of the two materials. So you have the dark kind of black, dark gray material in the steel, and then that bright copper, beautiful color that you get with a scoop, and nothing's being heated with it. It's food safe and everything. I thought it'd be a really awesome design with the two to combine together, incorporating that kind of like handmade look and leaving those textures from the hammers and things like that, not making it so it's perfectly smooth. I don't like it mirror polished myself. I like it to have a little bit of a matte finish. And I love stuff like that. I don't like things that are brightly polished and things like that. I like stuff that has character. So what drew me to blacksmithing and craftsmanship in general was my family. My grandfather was a World War II Vietnam and Korea vet. He was also a carpenter. And then my mom and dad were both artists in their own right. My mom did a lot of drawing and painting, crocheting, knitting, things like that. And then my dad, he got into carpentry a little bit later in life, like towards his retirement, making like secret compartment toy boxes for my niece and nephew that actually has riddles and clues and stuff like that age with them kind of thing. And he's built a lot of his own furniture and stuff at his house. One of my favorite projects I did when I was in school was a scale replica of a medieval trebuchet. So for my physics class, I made an actual scale model of one. And the medieval things was actually what got me into blacksmithing and the passion for metalwork, because I loved seeing the armor and seeing the weaponry and seeing all the different little like wall sconces and things like that that they made back in that day with minimal materials. They didn't have anything like what I have in my shop right now, and they were still able to make some really badass things. Being able to take a blank piece of stock, whether it be a railroad spike, literally anything that's made out of steel that you can work with in a forge, and seeing the process of making it starting from point A all the way down to point Z. I love taking before and after pictures of what I work with because I like seeing just how much I've been able to change this blank piece of stock into whatever I make at the end. So that's something I really love about it and really, really drew me to the metalwork. Working with copper for the first time was a bit of a struggle, I'm not gonna lie. My first few attempts, it was definitely a very steep learning curve. I wasn't 100% comfortable with what I was doing yet. So the first few times I didn't realize just how often you needed to anneal the copper to make it soft, because copper work hardens. So the more you hammer it, the more you work with it, the harder it gets. So you gotta anneal it every once in a while to get it nice and soft. So I had a few cracks, I had a few times when I was shaping the bowl that the little waves that you get folded over on each other. So taking my time a little bit more, working out all those kinks and learning to anneal as often as I possibly can. I probably over anneal sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, just because I wanna make sure it's perfectly soft and everything's good. So that was a bit of a struggle, but it's such a fun material to work with. It's the first metal that I've worked with that you can cold forge. And so it's been a lot of fun learning how to work with that material, and I really look forward to making more with it. When I first moved out to California, I started taking some classes at a local forge in Glendale. So I took like the very intro classes, making things like a barn hook with a little twist on it. It basically teaches you the fundamentals of blacksmithing, learning how to do a taper, learning how to hold tongs properly, how to heat the metal, identify when the metal's ready to heat. And I took a couple other classes, like I took a Bowie knife class. So they took like an old rasp and you turn it into a small Bowie knife. It's a very, very rough Bowie knife. I look at that knife compared to like the last knife I made, and it's real rough, but it was fun. It was a good learning experience. I learned how to do different things like the quench, making sure that it's hardened, things like that. But once I took those first couple of classes, I just did their open forge, and I was able to go throughout the week and just practice what I had learned. So they have all the forges open for you. You bring your own stock, you use their tools. And I basically just, until I was able to set up my own forge, I used that space to hone my skills and get to where I am today. So some of the best advice that I got from a teacher was actually my very first class. The guy that taught me, his name is Aram, he basically told me everything in a forge is hot, basically. This is something that I live by because I've burnt myself many a time before I really knew this rule. It's basically every surface that you're working on is potentially hot. The forge is hot, the anvil's hot because you're hitting hot metal on it, the tongs are probably gonna be hot, the thing you're working with is probably hot. So one of the things he said is like, yeah, just because it looks like it's probably cold doesn't mean it is, because steel can still be 400, 500 degrees and look like it's perfectly cold. So learning that everything is potentially hot and everything could potentially hurt you in a forge was a pretty good life lesson. Some of the things that I focused on with the design of the scoop itself and the whole thing, the handle and the scoop, was making sure that it fit the hand properly. I have a bit bigger hands, so I made sure that if it was my hand, if it was in somebody's smaller hand, it would still be comfortable. So with the scrolling on it, I made sure that when your hand's in there, it kind of has your pinky at the end there, so it's not going to slip out of your hand or anything like that. And then with the scoop itself, the scoop design for the being attached to the handle, I kind of started out with a bit of a ladle design, so I had to kind of work through a couple different iterations and prototypes to get one that not only looked good, but also was functional, being able to scoop out the beans, and then depending on how you wanted to store it, I mean, it sits perfectly flat on the desk, so it's not gonna fall over or anything like that. So some advice that I might give to anybody that's potentially looking to get into blacksmithing or metalworking in general is to look around your city, look around your state, and see if they have any classes available, or if there's any local craftsmen that are willing to teach classes. Actually, when I first moved here, I contacted a blacksmith who works in movies and TV and asked if they would be willing to take me on as an apprentice. And he said, no, not at this time, but hey, there's a forge school that you could go to. So reaching out to local craftsmen, local blacksmiths, and if they can't teach you, I'm sure they can point you in the right direction.